continuing building up to Rambo Last Blood. If you check out the First Blood review, I got that here on my channel. You can check out Rambo First Blood Part 2 on the Silver Screen Analysis. And Anthony rejoins me again today to dive into Rambo 3. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is our retro review for Rambo 3. You feel like it should be called First Blood Part 3, don't you, Anthony?
It should be. I mean, they obviously went with just the Roman numerals were hot at the time.
Oh, that's true. You know, it was the late 80s, so, I guess you gotta take that. Anyway, this is Anthony. He's joining me from the Silver Screen Analysis. Anthony, tell us about your channel.
Yeah, you can find me on the Silver Screen Analysis talking all things movies. I love to talk 80s movies. I love to talk 90s movies, and I've had such a great time blasting through these Rambo films. It's been like a trip down memory lane, and this one may not be so nostalgic as the other two, but we're going to give it our best shot.
Now, this is why I have Anthony here. This dude grew up with Rambo, grew up with this. I did not. I literally just watched this for the first time last week to get prepared for Last Blood. So I'm coming into this as the newbie. He's the dude that's been around, grew up on this stuff. So Anthony, let's just kick this off to you first. Your initial thoughts with Rambo 3.
Rambo 3, to me, almost felt like a remake of Rambo 2 in many ways. There was not a lot of creative ambition to it. I mean, even as a kid, it didn't really stick with me. I mean, there's a couple of cool Rambo scenes in there, but I mean, the story with him having to go save Trautman, I thought it could have been just woven a lot better, but there's just not really any layering to it. It just had that same generic villain as the film before it. So for that aspect, it's like when you want to see all the explosions and, taking it to Afghanistan, and that area was pretty cool to get kind of different landscapes for Rambo to do his Rambo killing stuff and to go to war against another army all by himself, but it just wasn't very impressionable even as a kid growing up. It just was like, by the time that came around, it was like late 80s. I think this movie came out in 88 if I remember correctly, and it wasn't very impressionable because it didn't really think outside the box. It was just that same thing of Rambo having to go in and do something, and yeah, I mean, his hair was a little bit too long. I mean, this is where Charlie Sheen got his, from Hot Shots. It felt like this is the perfect look for Stallone. Was just, it was too self-aware, and for the self-awareness that it brought, it didn't really bring that much ingenuity to just the concept, and it just felt like a rehash of everything in the last film, but just not with the same impact.
Yeah, you talk about it not being memorable. I even took notes to, be ready to talk about this, and I'm even looking at my notes going, what does that note even mean? It's like it didn't leave even that much of an impression on my mind when I was going through it, because it really did feel like Rambo First Blood Part 2 rehashed, but in a different setting and maybe slightly less impressive. And, I mean, it does have good action, and Sylvester Stallone, I think, does have a, good performance with it, but it's just, yeah, they didn't risk anything, they didn't take it outside the box, they didn't do anything different. It just kind of was a 80s action film. The one thing I kind of liked, and they didn't bring this full circle to Rambo 4. And I know this because I watched Rambo 3 and 4 in the same day, so it was kind of a interesting thing. But at the beginning, when Rambo is living with the monks, and the colonel comes and is trying to convince him to, come with him to Afghanistan, and Rambo's like, no, I don't want to do that. And the colonel has this analogy. He says, some famous artists say when they carved a statue, that the statue was already there, they just cleared away the rubble. We say we trained you to be a fighter, but that's not what happened. You were already a fighter. We just cleared away the rough places. You need to come full circle and come to terms with what you are. And I feel like that was kind of a very interesting thing brought into it that didn't come full circle until Rambo 4. 20 years later. So I thought that was kind of an interesting concept, but that was the utmost depth that this movie went.
Yeah, from there it just went right back into the just going through the motions of all the other things that the film did before. It had just the whole concept of Trautman going on this mission wasn't developed enough to where I even felt reasonably believable that it would actually need to happen. And then it's like you get Red from that 70s show coming back and just saying, hey, just to let you know, he was captured and we're not going to send anybody. And then Rambo's like, oh, what if you send me? And he's like, well, we'll have to disavow all knowledge of your thing. I'm used to it. It's like, it's lazy. It's even lazy back in the 80s, because it's like, you could come up with better than that for the character. And then from there, it's like, it just went through too many. We've seen the helicopter stuff. We've seen just a lot of the bow and arrow stuff. And it was just like, give us some new action. I mean, even Fast and Furious, as crazy as it gets, I mean, by the time 7 comes around, they're shooting a car out of one building and into another. So it's like, as crazy as it gets, they're at least changing it up. It's not like the same thing. This was just too much. I thought they could have just, kind of massaged the action a little bit. I mean, I did like the cave sequence was pretty cool. The tank, where he's in the tank, could have been much more impressionable. But, having the foreign villain inside the helicopter, we've seen that before. And it just doesn't really leave an impression, to where it was kind of like, I kind of understand why they maybe just left the franchise alone after that, despite Stallone still having plenty of gas in the tank through the 90s to do another Rambo movie if he wanted to.
Oh yeah, they really could have. But yeah, I think I agree with you. This was the thing that just kind of brought it to an end, because it really is just like, well, what more can you do with this character? And I think that's the impression you're left with. It's like, no, he's a cool character, and he can do a lot of cool action stuff, but what this movie is showing us is, this is movie 2 redone. So is there really nothing else that you could do with this character? So until 20 years later, they didn't really find something different to do. And I think that's why this one is just kind of, like, I seriously, at this point, I have nothing else to contribute to this conversation, because I remember very little of it, having just watched it. And so I don't mean to, like, crap all over it. It's just, it wasn't a terrible movie, but it definitely wasn't memorable. It definitely wasn't something that added to the Rambo mythology and made him even cooler. It just was.
Yeah, this was the movie where it lived and died because it was way too comfortable on being just self-aware to the fact that Rambo is going to sell. It was too... we know who this character is. We're just going to have him walking around real slow and with his chest out, and we're just going to keep him real ripped and real oily, and we're going to have him kill some guys, and he's going to be Rambo being Rambo in this one. I thought Stallone was just overly self-aware in this movie, to where he was just hamming it up throughout, and not in the good way like he did in Rambo 2. I don't know. I thought him going to this village and meeting these people, and just this different landscape and this different plot that's kind of the same as the other plots could have been better, but they just didn't really try to add anything to it. It just kind of felt like, here's another version of Rambo buying Stallone, not really selling a character. It's like, here's Stallone as Rambo, go watch it.
Yep. And that's kind of where it just left me. So my final grade for this, I think, is probably like a C-. It just wasn't that impressionable to me. I didn't think it was the worst movie I've seen. It wasn't the worst action movie I've seen, but in terms of what we know of this character, it's not impressive.
No, I would have to agree with you. I'd probably give it like a C-, C- as well. Even going back and watching the movie recently, it's like you say, you watch it and it immediately like goes in one ear and out the other, or in one eye and out the other, because I mean, other than a couple of, little Rambo scenes, it's like, I think the coolest moment, I will say, okay, I'll give it a C on this, just the fact that he put the tip of the gunpowder inside of when he lights his thing. That was a pretty cool moment that's kind of buried inside of a crappy movie, but I think it's a fantastic Rambo scene. So yeah, I'll give it a C just for that. I mean, that was pretty cool, to where, I mean, his acting was actually pretty good in that scene, and it was just kind of cheesy and excessive, but it kind of showed how much of a badass he was, and it was like the one thing in the movie that was kind of different than anything else.
I totally forgot about that until you just said it, and I agree. That was kind of cool and hardcore, That's an action star right there that can set off gunpowder in his wound and then be like, hoo-ah!
Right, and then he's still just, later on, you got the red dot on each side, and he's like acting like nothing happened.
Exactly. Typical 80s action film. Well, Anthony, tell us where we can find you one more time.
Yep, you can find me on the Silver Street Analysis, talking movies all the time. You can find me on Twitter at Your Cinema Guy. Go over there, swing by the channel, check out some videos. Definitely check out our Rambo 2 review coming up, or that we have on the channel, and then come back and check out Rambo 2008 that we're going to be talking about.
Yes, it's going to be epic. I cannot wait to talk Rambo 2008 on his channel. tomorrow. So make sure you go over to his channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell by his subscribe button so you're notified whenever he drops a new video, and then do the exact same thing here so you're notified the next time I drop a new movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. This is Anthony. Thanks for checking out Durbania.